I know why you're here, and I'm not going to make you wait to get to it. Something has felt off for a long time, not the dramatic kind of off that gets a name and a turning point and a clear before and after, the quiet kind, the kind that accumulates so slowly you almost don't notice until one day you're standing in a room that is objectively fine, a life that is objectively fine, and something in the center of your chest is saying, this is not the thing. This is not the real thing. You've been tolerating, and you've been very, very good at it, not because you're weak. I want to say that clearly and directly. You've been tolerating because you're patient, because you believed on some level that this is what maturity looks like, that you'd be asking for too much if you asked for more, that the arrangement, however imbalanced, was stable, and stability has its own value, that the version of yourself who needed what you actually need is somehow less reasonable, less acceptable, less justifiable than the version of yourself who simply continues, on. April 1st, 2026 at 10:12 in the evening Eastern Time, a full moon rises at 12 degrees and 21 minutes of Libra, directly opposite the Sun in Aries, with Saturn pressing hard on that Aries Sun from the near degrees of the same sign. And what I can tell you, with the kind of certainty that 40 years of reading these cycles produces, is this: what has been buried in the politeness of your daily life is coming to the surface. What has been held in quiet tolerance is about to find its voice. And the 3 signs I'm about to name are the ones for whom this full moon is not a gentle nudge. It is a revelation. I'm Luna Solano. I've been reading charts for 40 years, and I want to talk to you today not as an astrologer delivering information, but as someone who has watched this particular full moon configuration produce the same pattern in chart after chart for decades. I want to tell you what it actually does, what it's actually here for, and what I believe you need to understand about it before it arrives. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because this full moon is the first in a sequence I'm going to be covering over the next several weeks, and what happens in the aftermath of April 1st is in some ways even more significant than the full moon itself. I want you to have the full picture. Here is the astrological anatomy of this full moon. The moon at 12 degrees of Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, the planet of love, beauty, worth, and the standards by which we measure what we are willing to accept. Libra is the sign of relationship, of balance, of the scales that are supposed to be equal and so often aren't. And as this full moon rises on April 1st, Venus herself has just moved into Taurus, her home sign, the sign where she is most stable, most reliable, most insistently honest about what has actual enduring value and what only appears to have value under the right conditions and the right lighting. Venus in Taurus doesn't romanticize. Venus in Taurus asks, what, when examined without the flattery of hope or the sedative of habit, is actually worth keeping? What has genuine, material, irreducible value? And what has been maintained at a cost you can no longer honestly afford to sustain? Now add the Sun at 12 degrees of Aries, applying a conjunction to Saturn. Saturn, the planet of accountability and long-term consequence, entered Aries in February of 2026, the first time it has occupied this sign since 1996, nearly 30 years ago. And what Saturn does when it arrives in Aries and begins building strength is something I've watched it do before. It burns away what isn't real, what isn't solid, what looked like a foundation but was actually an agreement to maintain appearances, what seemed like stability but was actually a shared investment in not looking too closely at something that would change everything if looked at clearly. When Saturn conjuncts the Aries Sun and sits opposite a Libra full moon, which is the configuration of April 1st, the exposure that results is not subtle and it is not temporary. The Sabian symbol for 12 degrees of Libra is one of the most direct and unambiguous images in the entire Sabian wheel. Miners emerging from a deep coal mine. people who have been underground, people who have been working in difficult, cramped, dark conditions, doing real, hard, often unacknowledged work in an environment that was not comfortable, that was not lit for visibility, that required them to constantly adapt and adjust to a space that was not designed for human beings to thrive in long term. And now they are coming up into the light. They are blinking. They are adjusting to a world that has more light than the one they've been living in. They are seeing, perhaps for the first time in a long time, the world as it actually is, rather than as it appears in the controlled and limited illumination of the underground. I have been doing this for 40 years, and I want to say something clearly that mainstream astrology tends to soften. Full moons in Libra, especially at corrective degrees like 12, don't just bring balance. They expose imbalance. They reveal the gap between what we have been describing as acceptable and what is actually acceptable when examined without the varnish of familiarity and the inertia of what has always been done this way. And when that revelation arrives with the full weight of Saturn's accountability behind it, as it does on April 1st, what gets exposed tends to be precisely the thing that most needed exposing and that had been most expertly avoided. I know this might feel like a threat. It isn't. It's the most useful thing the sky can do. Let me speak very directly now to the 3 signs most powerfully activated by this full moon. If you are a Libra, this full moon is in your first house, in your house of self, identity, your body, and the way you present yourself to the world. And I want to be honest with you right now, with the kind of honesty I would offer a close friend. For once, for this one full moon, the question is not about the other person. It's not about the relationship or what they need, or how to make this arrangement work better for everyone involved. This full moon is shining its full light directly on you, on the version of you that has been managing and accommodating and adjusting and making everyone comfortable for so long that you may have genuinely, authentically lost track of what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what would be reasonable to want given the circumstances, what you actually, in your deepest and most honest interior, want. The cosmos is asking Libra right now, what would you choose if your choice affected no one but yourself? What would your life look like, your actual daily material life, if you stopped optimizing it for everyone else's comfort? This question is not comfortable. It may feel selfish to even ask, but it is the right question. And the answer that surfaces at this full moon is not one to file away for later. It is one to act on. If you are an Aries, this full moon activates your 7th house of partnerships, close relationships, and the people with whom you share the most significant one-to-one connections of your life. The sun is in your sign, in close proximity to Saturn, and the full moon is rising directly across from you into your relationship house. This is the full moon that makes something undeniable. Perhaps it's a romantic relationship that has been coasting on the comfort of what once was, rather than the reality of what currently is. Perhaps it's a professional partnership where the distribution of effort and recognition has quietly become lopsided in ways that have never been acknowledged. Perhaps it's any relationship, any significant one-to-one, where the honest accounting of what is given and what is received reveals a gap that has been politely not examined for far too long. The cosmos is not punishing Aries, but it is presenting an accounting. What have you been tolerating in your partnerships that you would not have accepted 5 years ago? What have you allowed to gradually become normal that was never actually normal? The full moon will illuminate it. Aries' instinct will be to respond immediately, to address the imbalance, to say the thing, to move. I want to ask you to do something different. See it first, fully. Let the light show you what is there before you decide what to do with it. Clarity before action. This month, that sequence matters enormously. And if you are a Cancer, this full moon activates your 10th house of career, professional reputation, vocation, and your standing in the world. Cancer often prioritizes the private life, home, family, the inner landscape, the relationships that feel safe and held. And this is one of Cancer's profound gifts, the capacity to value what is real over what is visible, what is nourishing over what is impressive. But the 10th house full moon is asking Cancer to turn and look at the part of your life that the professional world sees, your work, your contribution, your standing in the field or community where you spend your days, and specifically, where has Cancer been smaller, quieter, less visible than their actual capacity warrants? Where has Cancer been staying out of professional view because making themselves visible felt too exposed, too risky, too much of a deviation from the role they'd agreed to play? The miners emerging from the coal mine are coming up into the light. Cancer, it is time to come up, not with fanfare, not with performance, with the quiet certainty of someone who has been doing real work in difficult conditions and has every right to have that work seen in the world. Now, I want to say something to the people listening who are feeling a particular kind of resistance to everything I've just described. A voice that says, but things are okay. Things aren't perfect, but they could be so much worse. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should be grateful for what I have and stop wanting more. Maybe patience is the virtue here, and I just need to continue. And I hear that voice. I've heard it in hundreds of readings, and I want to be honest with you about what I've observed, because I think it's more important than whatever comfort I might offer by agreeing with it. Patience in astrology is a genuine virtue. Saturn teaches it, and Saturn's lessons are real and valuable. But there is a critical distinction between patience and avoidance. Patience says, I am waiting for the conditions to be genuinely ready, and I am doing real, honest preparatory work while I wait. Avoidance says, I am waiting for the discomfort to go away on its own, for the situation to resolve without my having to act, for the thing that needs to somehow change without my having to change anything about how I'm living. Full moons, in my experience, do not reward the second kind of waiting. They dissolve it. They pull what has been in the comfortable basement of avoidance up into the full light of the living room, lay it on the table, and ask you to deal with it, courteously but insistently, tonight. This is not a punishment. This is, in the deepest and most literal sense of the word, a promotion. The universe is not exposing what you've been tolerating because it wants to cause you pain. It's exposing it because you are ready, more ready than you know, more ready than the quiet, cautious, self-managing part of you has been willing to admit, to live without it. To live without the management, without the tolerance, without the quiet cost of a life slightly smaller than your actual self. Here is what I recommend for the days surrounding this full moon. In the 3 days before April 1st, which is to say, beginning this weekend if you're watching in real time, keep a simple record, not an elaborate journaling practice, not a therapeutic excavation project, just a daily, honest, brief accounting. At the end of each day, write down one thing that drained you, one thing that cost more than it returned, one thing that required you to manage yourself, suppress something, or perform a version of yourself that wasn't quite real. Don't analyze it. Don't justify it. Just note it. By the time the full moon rises on April 1st, you will have a short list. And that list will be remarkably specific and remarkably honest about what is ready, what is more than ready to be released. On the night of the full moon itself, after 10 p.m. Eastern, or whenever the moon is visible in the sky where you are, if you can go outside, go outside. If you can't, stand at a window where you can see or feel the light, and simply allow yourself to be present with the moon. Don't perform a ceremony. Don't say anything elaborate. Just be there, look, and allow whatever arises to arise. Full moons do not require our performance. They only require our willingness to be present with what they illuminate. If something surprises you, if a clarity arrives that feels sudden and perhaps a little frightening in its completeness, do not dismiss it. Do not explain it away. Do not immediately construct the argument for why it can't be acted on. Write it down. Sleep on it. Let it be real in your life for at least 48 hours before you make any decisions about it. And then, in the days that follow, begin making the small, honest, consistent movements that align your external life with what the full moon has shown you. Avoid, during this period, making commitments you already know in your body that you won't keep. Saturn opposite the moon, the astrological signature of this full moon, is particularly unforgiving of false commitments. Any agreement you make during this window in bad faith, any recommitment to an arrangement that you know privately is not sustainable, any promise offered to keep the peace rather than keep the truth, the weight of Saturn will make itself felt on that false commitment within days, not as punishment, as correction. And it will be far easier, far kinder, far more honest to simply not make the false commitment in the first place. I want to close by saying something I find myself thinking about more and more as 2026 unfolds. This year is not a year for managing. It is not a year for the quiet diplomacy of staying comfortable in arrangements that stopped genuinely working a long time ago. Saturn in Aries, full moons at corrective degrees, Jupiter at its exaltation. 2026 is the year the universe stops being patient on your behalf. Not because it has given up on you, because it has decided that you are ready, that the version of you who can live without what you've been tolerating is not a future version. That version is already here, already formed, already present in the things you know and won't quite say yet. The miners are emerging from the coal mine. They've been working in the dark for a long time. They're coming into the light. And the light, this full moon, this extraordinary Libra full moon with Saturn bearing witness and Venus in her home sign keeping honest count, is ready for them. Tell me in the comments, what is one thing you are finally ready to stop tolerating? Say it. Make it real in words, in writing, in the space of this community. The universe and I will be listening. Until next time, keep looking up. This is Luna Solano.